This conference will now be recorded.
All right, folks. So good morning, and thank you for attending class today. We are going to be talking about and discussing, and I will be lecturing on the endocrine system. We've gone over the nervous system and talked about how important the nervous system is as far as control of the body, and very quick control at times, but very fast control, but not long lasting as far as its effects in comparison to the endocrine system, which can be slower in its ability to control what takes place in the body, but can have longer lasting effects. Okay, so both systems work in conjunction with each other, but again, understand that the nervous system really is the master controller over what takes place and works in conjunction with the endocrine system. And we'll see how the endocrine system works with a series of glands and hormones that are produced and sent out in the cardiovascular system in the blood to all parts of the body, and how this is really important as far as controlling what takes place with the body. So you'll see here that these hormones, these are these long distance signaling molecules, meaning that they can be produced in one area of the body. So say, for example, the thyroid gland is producing thyroid hormone, and yet it can send through the blood these hormones that are produced, this thyroid hormone, T3 and T4, can be released into the blood and sent throughout the whole body. And know that the whole body, all the tissues of the body and the cells of the body have receptors for thyroid hormone. It's we would say, a major metabolic hormone. It controls the metabolism of what takes place in the body. I'll give you an example of this. So when we think of thyroid hormone, if you have too much thyroid hormone, imagine you're in a car and you have your foot on the gas pedal and you're pushing it all the way to the floor. Okay, if you're pushing it all the way to the floor, that means that there's too much of this hormone, and so the car is going very fast. And imagine that your body is jacked. So in other words, not jacked like muscle bound, so to speak, but more like just jacked up, like you're really hyper, and things are working at an accelerated rate in your body. So you'll be sweating a whole lot. You'll be nervous. There'll be a lot of other things going on with your body. Your heart rate, your respiratory rate, they'll all be accelerated. They'll be increased. Okay, that's as if you have too much thyroid hormone. So like the gas pedal is pushed all the way to the floor. You're flying as far as in the car is concerned. You're going really fast. That's not so good, right? Short instances and terms and times where you can have, your body accelerated. For example, say in the case of like you see a bear and you're going to respond to that bear in some way, whether running or fighting or whatever you're doing, right? Some kind of stressful situation. It's good that your body can be elevated and accelerated for a short period of time, but long term, that's not a good or healthy thing. How about in the other case of too little thyroid hormone, so hypothyroidism? It's as if instead of pressing on the gas pedal all the way to the floor, like in hyperthyroidism, too much thyroid hormone, where you're hardly touching the gas pedal. Yeah, you're touching it so that the car's moving, but it's kind of creeping or crawling. It's not going very fast. It's not going it's going really slow. That would be hypothyroidism. There's thyroid hormone being released, but very little of it. Now, in some instances, there is situations where a patient is born with an inactive and not producing thyroid gland totally, and so this would be a congenital hypothyroidism, and this can lead to serious circumstances, what we'll talk about later on in the PowerPoint here. But just know that. So I give you this example of thyroid hormone and how too much or too little can really affect how the body functions. Well, these hormones really have control with the nervous system and how the body functions and maintains homeostasis, a stable environment within the body. Your blood pressure, your heart rate, your respiratory rate, the chemical levels within your body, they're all maintained into levels that are going to be normal and healthy for you. When things are out of kilter and they're too high or too low, this is when we have problems. So the hormones, long distance signaling molecules, really transporting throughout the body via the blood. Okay, we call them chemical messengers. They act on target cells, and so these target cells, these cells within the body, in the case of the thyroid hormone, it's all the cells, same with growth hormone. But in the case of other types of hormones, this can be different as far as we can have where only specific cells and tissues have specific receptors to receive these target these hormones. So we would say that these target cells that are receiving these hormones have specific receptors on them for these hormones. So each hormone has a specific receptor for it. Okay, that's important, so that they can have the action. What is the action of the hormone once it reaches its target cell? And we'll talk about that. And I mentioned to you, just give you an example regarding the thyroid hormone and what kind of action that can take place as a result of interacting with the specific cells and target tissues of the body. Endocrine system is slower acting, longer lasting. That's important for you to know. Opposite of the nervous system is quick acting and shorter lasting, shorter duration of effect. These hormone producing glands, cells, and organs are present within the endocrine system. So interaction as far as these hormones are concerned, right? So 2 or 3 more hormones may affect the same process in that one hormone can cause an action in one direction and another hormone can cause an opposite action. So this would be this opposing action. So in other words, say in the levels of blood calcium levels within the body, some hormones can increase those levels and some hormones can decrease those levels. And we'll discuss that and talk about that in more detail. Synergistic, they're working together. Hormones cooperate to produce the effect, okay? So they'll work synergistically, just as muscles can work synergistically, or they can work in opposition to each other. Permissive action, so one hormone can exert its effect only if another hormone primes the target cell. And so this is very important, knowing that there's a lot of complexity to the endocrine system and the actions and the interactions between the hormones and the target cells. Here, this is a nice image and just showing you regarding hormones of the body, glands of the body that produce these hormones. So in the case of the hypothalamus, this is a part of the nervous system. And you'll see it's deep within the nervous system, protected. And the hypothalamus controls the master gland of the endocrine system, which would be the pituitary gland. You'll see here also that the pineal gland is located in the posterior aspect, right about here, okay? And then we have the thyroid gland, we have the thymus gland, the adrenal glands, the pancreas, the ovaries, in the case of the male, the testes, okay? And so these are all involved in producing not all of the hormones, but most of the hormones, the majority of the hormones present within the endocrine system. So you'll see here that there are different types of hormones. So we'll have steroid hormones and non-steroid hormones. The steroid hormones, very important to understand that they are lipid soluble. So they're fats, okay? Produced as a result of cholesterol, and you'll see that these steroid hormones can actually enter into the cells, okay? Because the plasma membrane of cells are a fat, are a lipid. And so because these steroid hormones are lipids, they're able to pass directly through the cell plasma membrane and enter inside of the cells and cause some type of action. Whereas non-steroidal hormones, right, they cannot just directly enter into the cell, but they actually need, you'll see here, a second messenger. They need to interact with a receptor outside of the cell on the plasma membrane, which will in turn cause changes to take place within the cell. Okay, so pretty interesting as far as how they actually do their jobs. And here you're going to see an example of, so here we have this second messenger. We have the interaction of, so a peptide hormone, this would be an amino acid type hormone. We know that proteins are comprised, they're made up of amino acids, right? So a peptide hormone, so we see here the example of molecule here, glucagon. Okay. This diffuses from the blood into the interstitial fluid, bathing the plasma membrane of the liver cell. Okay, and it's not going to enter directly into the liver cell. Okay, here's the plasma membrane. It's a fat, right? This is too large, and it's going to interact with a receptor outside of the cell, which in turn will then cause change to take place within the cell. In opposition to this, and really, it's a type of different type of method of causing action to take place within the cell. We are going to have this steroid hormone it's a fat. It's going to enter directly pass through this fat, the plasma membrane, and enter into the nucleus itself and cause change to take place. Okay, so you'll see here that the hormone receptor complex triggers transcription of a specific gene. So recall these terms, transcription and translation, have to deal with production of proteins. So we're going to have protein production taking place, right? The resulting messenger RNA moves into the cytoplasm and is transcribed into a protein. So this is where we're taking place, we're causing action to take place within the cell because that steroid hormone can pass through the plasma membrane. In the case of the peptide hormone, it's not passing through. It can only cause change by interacting with this receptor outside of the plasma membrane attached to it, but will in turn then cause these specific changes through this other processes that will, I'm not going to ask that you know or memorize, okay? Now we have this portion of the brain. It's called the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is really in the very central region of the brain, right? Very protected because it's a very important structure present within the brain. And this really is what's going to control what takes place with the master gland of the endocrine system, the pituitary gland, okay? And we're going to see how there are hormones that are produced in the hypothalamus that will go to the pituitary gland, and the pituitary gland will either send those hormones out via the posterior pituitary, or in the anterior pituitary will respond by releasing its own specific hormones in order to then cause change to take place in the endocrine system. So here we're seeing, as far as this region of the brain is called the hypothalamus. It's part of the third ventricle. I had showed you that in last class, and so let's just take a look for a moment at another image here. Okay, so let's take a look at this image right here. And let's make it bigger so we can see what we want to look at here. Very good. So what we're looking at here, folks, is that here's the nasal cavity, here's the oral cavity, that's your tongue, right? Here's your nose, right? And so here we have the third ventricle, okay? And this here region right here is called the hypothalamus, right? The hypothalamus, this is the thalamus, hypothalamus present within this third ventricle. And here's the pituitary gland. And you can see that there's a little line here. That's a stalk. That's the connection between the hypothalamus and this pituitary gland, okay? So now let's see as far as what's taking place and what's happening. Here, okay, good. So there's two portions of the pituitary gland. There's a glandular portion, okay, that actually embryonically comes from the roof of your mouth. And then there's this posterior portion right here of the pituitary gland. And this actually has neurological tissue origin. And you'll see here that there's a connection between the neurons of the hypothalamus and into the posterior pituitary, okay? Secretory hormone neurons in the hypothalamus synthesize, they produce ADH, antidiuretic hormone, and oxytocin, okay? So oxytocin actually works as far as with these receptors in the walls, the musculature of the uterus, and allow for contraction. So when if you have PMS and you experience cramping and such, it's really, that's what's happening as far as that there's some tightening of the musculature within the uterus, okay? But during pregnancy, this helps to birth the baby, all right? So those cramping, those contractions are able to help to deliver the baby. So oxytocin is very important. Oxytocin also helps to, involved in the letdown of milk from the glands present within the breast. Okay, so in breast production, as far as breast milk production, working in conjunction with prolactin, another hormone. So you'll see here that oxytocin produced in the hypothalamus, released by the posterior pituitary gland. The ADH is an antidiuretic hormone. It's a water-conserving hormone, meaning that you're going to produce less urine. Your body is going to hold on to water as much as possible when increase in ADH is released. Again, ADH, antidiuretic hormone, produced here in the hypothalamus, released by the posterior pituitary, and it affects what's taking place within the kidneys, because the kidneys will filter blood and produce urine. Okay, so you're not going to produce as much urine. So if you're in a desert environment and you're dehydrated and you're not drinking and it's really hot and you're sweating, what's the body going to do? The body is going to try and conserve all the water that you have present within. So it's not going to produce a whole lot of urine because you need that water in order to help yourself, because you're not having access to, it's very hot. So ADH is really important. It's a water conserving hormone, producing less urine. Okay, so they're both released from that posterior pituitary. They're not produced here, they're released from here, right? And you'll see that the blood supply is right in this region, so allowing for the hormones to be released into the blood supply. Okay. The anterior pituitary, you'll see here that there are multiple hormones that are being released here. So you'll see that this ACTH, thyroid stimulating hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, luteinizing hormone, prolactin, growth hormone, very important, folks. So when you think of, so I said to you, as far as thyroid hormone, most cells of the body will have thyroid hormone receptors, specific receptors for thyroid hormone. And know that thyroid hormone works in conjunction with growth hormone to make sure that you have symmetry in your body parts. So growth hormone allows for what? Promotes growth in young people, causes protein synthesis, cell division, roles in glucose, protein metabolism in adults. It's a very important hormone, okay? Know that it works in conjunction with thyroid hormone to make sure that both of my hands are the same size, right? Relatively, you know, off by a little bit, but they're symmetrical. And same with my lower extremities, my upper extremities. Symmetry is important, and so thyroid hormone works in conjunction with growth hormone to do that. They both again affect most of the cells of the body. Okay, now you're looking at this ACTH. This is again produced in the anterior portion of the pituitary gland. And you'll see here release of cortisol. This is an important stress hormone. And in times of stress, it's very important. It's very effective. When we're not under stress and our body is kicking out a lot of cortisol, this can lead to other health issues. In particular, it can lead to weight gain. It can lead to issues as far as really, let's see here else. How else can I put this here? So weight gain is a big portion of the cortisol. It can lead to a diminishment or a making your immune system really much less effective. There you go, suppresses. That's the term I was looking for. It suppresses your immune function. Because what is it? Cortisol is an anti-inflammatory. If you have an issue with a joint of your body and you get a cortisone shot, if you might have had that if you play sports, a cortisone shot is, a form of cortisol, and it's a strong anti-inflammatory. Short term, a good thing, right? If you have a damaged joint and it's inflamed, take an anti-inflammatory. That really makes a difference. But know that inflammation is really the role of the immune system as far as doing what it needs to do, as far as fighting infection and keeping you well. If we take something and if we have this anti-inflammatory being present long-term, right, chronically, this is a problem, because then it's going to suppress your immune system and you'll be more susceptible to getting sick. So this is why the stress hormone cortisol, when say you're in stressful periods of time, say like during final exams, right, or during some other stressful period of time, know that you're more susceptible to getting a cold, to getting sick, to getting some type of infection, because your immune system is not working at 100%. Okay. Thyroid stimulating hormone, this TSH, this is really going to act on the thyroid gland, which will in turn release and synthesize, produce, and release thyroid hormones. Okay, so very important to have this So really what's going on is that there's a hormone produced by the thyroid, the hypothalamus, which will act upon the anterior pituitary to release its TSH, will then in turn work on the thyroid gland to release its thyroid hormones. Okay. I mentioned to you about FSH. I mentioned to you about prolactin before. We'll go that, and then we'll go to these two here. So prolactin really works to produce milk, milk production. So breast milk, this is really involved in stimulating and sustaining breast milk production, and really the baby suckling on the mother's breast, this really stimulates her body to produce more milk. Okay, so without the baby breastfeeding over time, the milk production will reduce and then stop altogether if the mother discontinues breastfeeding. You'll see here, as far as FSH is concerned, this is actually working on the ovaries and also the testes in the male, as far as in sperm production for the males, and then for the females, actual maturity of the ovaries, in the ovaries, that will mature the egg that will be released upon ovulation. And luteinizing hormone, this is the hormone that spikes at the right time during ovulation to release the egg out into the fallopian tubes, aka the uterine tubes. Okay, and so very important there. And then I mentioned about growth hormone. Okay, let's see here. I know that this is a lot of information, and again, like, it'll help to review the video, to review your PowerPoint in trying to understand this, but are there any questions at this point in time? Are we okay? Would you, any questions whatsoever? Have any of you, let me ask you this, have any of you had relatives or somebody that you know that maybe has some type of issue with the endocrine system? So many people commonly have issues with the thyroid gland, but there can be other issues. How about if you have issues with diabetes? This is affecting the endocrine system and the pancreas in particular. All right. Well, they're very common as far as thyroid disorders and such. So, all right, I'm going to hide everyone, and I'm going to share my screen with you all. Okay. So getting into the anterior pituitary, again, releasing these hormones, we just reviewed those and went over them. And you'll see here, I've provided some additional images for you in your PowerPoint regarding, so here, and it just kind of reversed as far as the image is concerned, but just know that here's the posterior pituitary. So the patient would be looking in to this side, so the anterior would be here. So here we have the anterior pituitary, posterior pituitary. Know that the hypothalamus, right? That neurological connection between the hypothalamus and the posterior pituitary, releasing ADH, the water conserving hormone, and oxytocin. And then we have here, as far as for this anterior pituitary and all these hormones that are being released. In addition to, and what I didn't mention to you before, was endorphins. You all have an idea regarding endorphins, because endorphins and kephalons, these are the body's natural pain relievers, okay? And so really very helpful as far as the ability to produce our own natural analgesics, right? Just as if you were to take a Tylenol or an ibuprofen, well, these endorphins are similar type chemicals that will act as pain relievers produced by your own body. And also know that when you're exercising and such, your body will produce more of these chemicals in order to help you and enable your ability to be able to exercise, even when it's a little difficult and challenging and tough. And here again, you're just seeing, as far as just another image, just showing you the target tissues of these hormones, where they're produced and released from, and just again another one, just giving you more information. So just giving you multiple images just so that you can see as far as the anterior posterior pituitary. And so when you look at the image, make sure that you're reading correctly, because again, too, like I said, this one has posterior pituitary on the left-hand side reading, and here we have the next two images. Posterior pituitary is on the right, again on the right. Okay. And here again, you're seeing as far as how the hypothalamus works in conjunction with the anterior pituitary in stimulating and sending hormones from the anterior pituitary, from the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary to release its specific hormones. Now, this is what I mentioned to you earlier there, and I want to just talk to you about it. This is called tropic hormones. And what we mean by tropic hormones is they are hormones that are not going to be released into the body per se, right? As far as trying to release to specific cells of the body that are going to create some type of change. Other than that, these tropic hormones go specifically to other areas of the endocrine system in order for them to then, when they go to that target gland will release a specific hormone in response to that tropic hormone. So TRH is a releasing hormone, thyroid releasing hormone or thyrotropin releasing hormone from the hypothalamus to the anterior pituitary, which will release its thyroid stimulating hormone, going to the thyroid gland, which will release then its thyroid hormones, which will then have an effect on target cells throughout the body. So these hormones right here, TRH and TSH, are tropic hormones. They will work on specific glands in the endocrine system to release their hormones. Okay. So you'll see here that hormones, it says here, typically regulate activities that occur over an extended period. And this is true in that they're going to go to specific receptors of their target tissues, and they'll cause an effect that will take place over extended periods of time, not just quick acting. So say in the case of the nervous system, we're sending a message to my skeletal muscle to remove my hand from a hot source. So say I touch the oven by accident, touch it, whoa, and then my hand is removed very quickly. Well, that was a very quick message sent to the skeletal muscles from the spinal cord to remove my hand quickly from that hot source. In the case of hormones, this can be hours to days that it can have this effect in the endocrine system. So growth hormone, right? Major effect on body growth, as simple as that, right? Synthesis of growth factor produced in the primarily triggering this in the liver. The liver has so many functions, folks. In addition to detoxification and such, it's quite remarkable in production of certain proteins that will actually be present within the blood, and we'll talk about this next chapter, that will actually carry substances through the blood, almost act as like a transport system within the blood, thinking of the blood like a highway, and then these proteins like the track, like a train or like a truck, transporting materials in the blood. So gigantism would be an excess growth. So when we talk about these hormones, many times we're going to talk about, well, what happens when there's too much of this hormone or too little of this hormone? Well, in the case of growth hormone, having too much of growth hormone, and while a person is developing and growing, this would be gigantism. So they can get to very tall heights, right? Very big people as a result of, there could be quite possibly a pituitary tumor that could trigger this, and it's very oftentimes the etiology, the cause of. If a person stops growing in height, yet they're still kicking out too much growth hormone, then what will happen is that they'll suffer from acromegaly, where their facial bones will increase in size, as well as their feet and their hands will increase in size. That's called acromegaly. So here we have a young man who, I believe he is one of the tallest people in the United States at this point in time. 7 foot 8 inches tall, weighs 500 pounds. That's incredible, right? That's amazing. And he had a pituitary tumor, and that's his mom next to him there. Here you have Andre the Giant, 7'4", 520 pounds. Massive people. Know, unfortunately, that people who have these issues with growth hormone and gigantism, many times they don't live very long. So I think Andre the Giant might have died in like his early 40s. So pretty sad. Dwarfism. So pituitary dwarfism, this would be as a result of too little growth hormone. Okay. Now, different from like Peter Dinklage from Game of Thrones. So he has a specific type of achondroplasia dwarfism, different from pituitary dwarfism, which will have more of a symmetry with the growth hormone. Okay. You'll see here a human growth hormone now made by genetic engineering. Children with naturally low GH levels can be given injections. It's expensive and controversial, but it can help them to grow. So you'll see here proportionate dwarfism. This would be regarding what takes place with pituitary issues, with pituitary dwarfism, whereas achondroplasia and other different types of genetic types of disorders will have a disproportionate as far as their limb size and head and torso. So you'll see here that this young woman, she's not a little baby, to be honest, right? She's older, and yet she has pituitary dwarfism, and she's just like if you were to shrink someone that was of normal stature and height, she has this proportionate dwarfism. Okay. All right, so I talked to you about thyroid hormone and how it's a major metabolic hormone, meaning that metabolism within the body is just the different types of reactions, chemical reactions that occur in order for you to function like you properly should, okay? Your metabolic rate, this is the rate at which your body is doing what it does as far as, so you've heard the term BMR, and you know, if you have a low BMR, that means that your ability to burn calories and such is going to be slower, and you're going to have issues with weight control and such. Exercise can increase your BMR. This basal metabolic rate, really very important. And the thyroid gland, again, like I said, imagine if you have too much of this thyroid hormone, it's like you're putting your foot down on the gas pedal all the way to the floor. Or if you have too little thyroid hormone, it's as if you're just touching the gas pedal a little bit, just enough to move, but not a whole lot, okay? Thyroid gland also produces calcitonin. Now, calcitonin and parathyroid hormone, this is what I mentioned about earlier as far as blood calcium levels. So if you'll see here, calcitonin actually decreases blood calcium levels. And then the opposite effect would be parathyroid hormone, PTH, which actually increases blood calcium levels. All right, so we'll talk a little bit more about that. You'll see here that iodine, very important as far as in our diet in order to then create thyroid hormone. Okay, it's very important. If there's a deficiency, we can end up suffering from a goiter, where the thyroid gland increases in size in order to try and do as much as it can in order to absorb as much iodine present that it can find within the body. So hypothyroidism, there's low levels of thyroid hormone in the body and a lower metabolism. Hyperthyroidism, an example would be what's called Graves' disease, which is an autoimmune disorder. It's an autoimmune type of hyperthyroidism. It's really the metabolism is accelerated, it's increased. Excess thyroid hormone in the blood speeds up the metabolism, okay? And then also, like I said here, PTH from the parathyroids is the main calcium regulator. So really, in conjunction with calcitonin, right, it works to maintain blood calcium levels, but really parathyroid hormone, PTH, has more of a stronger effect than calcitonin does on blood calcium levels right here, okay? So know that the parathyroid glands are, so let's show you an image. Let me come back to this. All right, so on the posterior aspect of the thyroid gland, you'll see here. So here would be the anterior portion of the thyroid gland, right? Or let's do this one, that one's better. All right, let me make this image bigger. So what you'll see here is that, so this would be your Adam's apple right here, the portion of your this is your voice box and this is your thyroid cartilage. So right here, you can palpate that in through there. That would be your Adam's apple. Right inferior below to it would be the thyroid gland. And you'll see on this is the anterior, the front part of your thyroid gland. The posterior aspect of your thyroid gland contains these 4 tissues here called the parathyroid glands. They're just little areas of the thyroid gland that actually will then be involved in producing that parathyroid hormone, that PTH, which helps to increase blood calcium levels in the body. Calcium is very important for the nervous system to function as well as the muscular system to contract. So very important as far as calcium regulation. And know that, where do we get this calcium from? But if we want, in addition to your diet, the more, where we go as far as like the bank for calcium that stores our calcium in the body, it's the skeletal system. So the parathyroid glands will actually be involved in breakdown of bone, increase in the breakdown of bone in order to release calcium into the blood. Okay, let's get right here. Good. All right, so you'll see here as far as hypothyroidism. So again, this is a really the body is really working in slow motion, so to speak. Doesn't produce enough thyroid hormone. There's weight gain, poor memory, so it can affect how your brain functions, or your nervous system functions. Intolerance to cold, feeling of tiredness, right? Carpal tunnel issues. I mean, so it can affect nervous system. The heartbeat can be slower. We call that bradycardia. You'll see here as far as the thyroid gland can becoming enlarged, loss of eyebrow hair, thinning hair, right? So just really issues with really a slow motion as far as how the body does what it does. Hyperthyroidism, really you'll see here as far as hyperthyroidism, we'll have what's called exophthalmos, where the eyes are actually look like they're bulging. Okay, and so this patient right here with hyperthyroidism, they're going to be very nervous and very just like everything is accelerated. Hypothyroidism, you see here issues with hair loss and such, and just everything's working in slow motion. Here we have a patient suffering with hypothyroidism who was able to get hormone replacement therapy, HRT, and really work to really help her thyroid to function better and be able to live more of a normal life with less of the effects of the hypothyroidism. You'll see here as far as this is just showing you again those tropic hormones, those hormones that are affecting glands, causing those glands to release their hormones to then send out. So you'll see here as far as the cessation of, so if the hypothalamus is not releasing this TRH, then the pituitary won't be releasing this TSH, and so then we're not going to be having thyroid hormone being released into the body. That's a bad thing. That can be very difficult as far as for this patient to really function. And you'll see here as far as also it's a negative feedback loop, meaning that if we have the hormones are at their proper levels, then those specific areas of the body that are producing those hormones will decrease the production. Okay. Here you're seeing an example of a goiter, okay, an enlargement of the thyroid gland. Primarily from hypothyroidism, but can also be from both types of disorders can cause a goiter to be produced. Here you're seeing as far as, so this patient right here has bow legs and such, so there's issues with what's taking place as far as the really maturity of the maturation of the skeletal system, and so that they're not as strong as they possibly could be. And really PTH is very important. So you see here, osteoclasts release calcium ions from the bone. Kidney tubules increase calcium ion reabsorption. Intestine increases their calcium ion reabsorption, which will in turn, so PTH is increasing blood calcium levels, but it can then affect the skeletal system, and this can lead to deformities if we're having a chronic issue of too high blood calcium levels, because if we have too much PTH being released, there's too much destruction of the bone to release the calcium into the blood. Now this is a very sad thing. This is as a result of what's called cretinism, as a result of congenital hypothyroidism. Okay, and so this can lead to issues that can lead to a short stature. This is an elderly patient, right, an older patient, but it can lead to issues like stunted growth, reduced growth and function of many organs, severe and irreparable mental defects. So different types of issues with the actual maturity of the brain, so that there can be cognitive issues. So there can be decrease in their levels of understanding and speech, and just really lead to mental types of abnormalities and such, and lack of function, and really inhibited ability to think. And so we'll see here, as far as cretinism is something also that can be caught early on, and testing is done for this in order to see if the patient, if this young little patient, this baby, has issues with this, and then we can do hormone replacement therapy in order to help them, okay, and prevent these different issues from occurring, like short stature, like issues with mental defects and such, okay. That's cretinism. Congenital hypothyroidism. Now, the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands, you know the term adrenaline. You've heard that term used a lot, I'm sure. So adrenaline, it's also known as the term epinephrine, okay? And this is your hormone that's released and regarding stressful situations, so that you can either do the fight or flight, preparing the body for some type of action to take place. That would be adrenaline, aka epinephrine. Right? Now, the adrenal cortex and the adrenal medulla are two separate regions of the adrenal glands. The adrenal medulla is what's releasing that epinephrine. The cortex, the outer portion of the adrenal gland, is producing hormones such as cortisol. And I said to you that this is that stress hormone. So it helps the body to manage stress short term. So raises blood glucose levels, right? And so here's the thing, short term, that's a good thing. Long term, that can be issues with causing weight gain, as well as inhibiting your immune function and your immune response. So this is hypercortisolism. So having too high levels of cortisol, and it's also known as Cushing's syndrome. It kind of mimics a bit of hypothyroidism, but there's still some issues that are a little bit different also, and you'll see many of these issues listed on this image here. Having low levels of cortisol, okay, as a result of issues where the patient has been under stress for so long that they can have what's called adrenal insufficiency, and so they're not producing enough cortisol, the stress hormone that is produced in response to stress. Well, they're not producing much of it at all, and as a result, so they can have issues with, so not producing sufficient steroid hormones, so they can have a hyperpigmentation, meaning they can look like they have a tan, and yet they really don't. It's as a result of this condition. President Kennedy, former President Kennedy, suffered with Addison's disease. Low blood pressure, weakness, weight loss, nausea, diarrhea, vomiting, constipation, abdominal pain. Vitiligo would be issues where there's patches of actual no skin pigmentation whatsoever. And this is also just a matter of, like, it's really the body is not handling, having any ability to handle stress whatsoever. So in a crisis situation, fever, fainting, that's what syncope is, convulsions, hypoglycemia, hyponatremia, issues with the levels of your ions present within the body, severe vomiting and diarrhea. So this is really can be a very critical situation. So too much cortisol, too little cortisol can be a problem for the body. And I said to you that damage to the adrenal glands can cause a variety of effects in metabolism. One is the increased skin color, so that hyperpigmentation. President Kennedy suffered with this. Now, also hypoglycemia. So we all experience some periods of hypoglycemic episodes in our bodies, and it's just a short period of time. So between meals and such, you can have lower blood glucose levels, and our bodies can produce hormones and release hormones that can help to increase blood glucose levels. So in the case of, say, glucagon in particular can be released that can increase blood glucose levels, between meals and such. But having chronic or issues with pathological issues with hypoglycemia can really be not a good feeling, and you could be lightheaded and really want to faint and such. It's really a very disconcerting type of an episode that can occur from hypoglycememia to low levels of blood glucose in the body. Mineralocorticoids are, in particular, aldosterone is one that would really be involved in working in conjunction with antidiuretic hormone, and that it can actually work to increase blood pressure in the body. If the blood pressure is low, aldosterone can be secreted and it can increase blood pressure levels. Why does it do this? Because it causes the sodium and water to be retained, just like the water conserving hormone ADH does. This will increase the blood volume and in turn increase blood pressure. And we'll discuss this in our cardiovascular chapter for sure. But know that anytime we're increasing the amount of water that we're holding on to, this will increase blood volume, which will in turn increase blood pressure. That's really an important statement right there for you to know. Okay. The cortex also generates sex hormones, and so this is very important as far as for the fetal and early puberty development of and maturation of the different reproductive glands within the body. The medullary region, that inner portion, produces epinephrine, norepinephrine, aka also known as adrenaline, noradrenaline. Okay, and these really prepare the body for action, and they regulate they help to regulate blood circulation, carbohydrate use when the body is stressed and excited, and again preparing you for action, whether it's to run or whether it's to fight, right? Okay, and so here we're seeing, and I just wanted to show you this here. So the medullary portion is nervous tissue. The cortical portion, that would be glandular tissue. Just like we saw in the pituitary gland, the anterior pituitary is glandular tissue, the posterior pituitary is nervous tissue. You know, you'll see that here in the adrenal glands, okay? And so the epinephrine, norepinephrine, the adrenaline, noradrenaline produced here in the medullary region. And then those other hormones we talked about for the adrenal gland produced in the cortical region. And here you're seeing also those tropic hormones, CRH and ACTH, that are stimulating glands in order to produce their hormones. You'll see here, this is quite interesting, and phthalates, right? Endocrine disruptors, okay? So these can be present within, they interfere with the normal hormone synthesis and function. They can be present in different consumer products that we have, as far as lotions, soaps, shampoos, plastic containers. This can leach into whatever we were using and get into our bodies, and this can affect. So look at this here. Used to soften PVC plastic as solvents in cosmetics, other consumer products can damage the liver, kidneys, lungs, and reproductive system, and affect how the endocrine system does what it does as far as releasing its hormones. So just to keep in mind, and interesting here as far as phthalate-free type products, you can say it on the packaging that we purchase. Now, as far as the pancreas is concerned, well, let's stop for a moment here. We have a few more slides to go through. Let me just stop what I'm doing. And all right, folks, let's do this. Let's take a 5-minute break, okay? I want to give you a 5-minute break, right? So I'll come back at 10:30 and we'll resume the class, okay? So I'm just going to turn off my camera and my mic, but we'll have a 5-minute break. You can go get a drink of water. You can do whatever you need to do for 5 minutes. We'll return to the lecture at 10:30, okay? So I'm going to keep the recording on, so there'll just be a 5-minute, break within, but you'll just, if you're watching the video, just fast forward 5 minutes from this point on. So we'll start in 5 minutes, class, okay? So take a 5-minute break. See you in 5.
Hello?
All right, so we're doing a 5-minute break. Okay, so I'm just taking a
What was,
5-minute break.
I'm sorry, I missed the last part. What was the 5-minute break for?
Yeah, so I'm just, because I have to step out of the room for a moment. So, and I'm just trying to
Okay.
break
I
it
was
up a
like,
little bit. Yeah.
I missed like the last part of that. And I'm like, what did I miss?
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so I'm just taking a
Okay,
5-minute
thank
break.
you.
We'll
All
start
right,
at
bye-bye.
10:31. Okay, thanks.
Okay.
All right, folks, very good. So welcome back, and we're going to begin finishing up our PowerPoint of the endocrine system. So let's just hide everyone, share my screen with you all, and continue on with this presentation. So now we're going to the pancreas. And we'll see here as far as the pancreas is involved in really the maintenance of the blood glucose levels, as well as working with the digestive system. Now, this would be the digestive portion of the pancreas, its ability to release different types of enzymes involved in breakdown of the materials that we take in as far as food substances. And so know that the major enzymes for digestion are produced by the pancreas. That's the digestive function. The endocrine function is actually present within the pancreatic islets, or the aisles of Langerhans is another term used to describe them. And these are little small areas, very oval shaped areas that will contain these specific types of cells that will be involved in maintaining blood glucose levels. So I said to you that when someone has, we have these hypoglycemic episodes that all of us do that don't have a pathology, but it just as a result of not eating, between meals. So then the body will release, in particular these alpha cells, will release glucagon, which will help to raise blood glucose levels by breaking down glycogen, which is how glucose is stored in the liver and the skeletal muscle. We break it down via the glucagon action, and it will then in turn release blood glucose glucose into the blood and raise its levels. As far as after you eat, insulin is being released. So if we take in food, and the body will then release via the beta cells insulin, which will help to lower blood glucose levels, because it does this by actually allowing for the glucose to enter into the cells of the body and use that. Because you know that if we have also too much glucose circulated in the body, then what will happen? Well, then the body will store it as glycogen in the liver and the skeletal muscle for when we need it. All right. So that's a very important aspect of it. And then you'll see here also that there are delta cells that are released somatostatin. So this is growth hormone inhibiting hormone. Okay, inhibits insulin and glucagon secretion. Okay. And here you're seeing an example of the alpha and beta cells doing their jobs, and what's happening, the response in regarding decrease in blood glucose levels, as far as or an increase in blood glucose levels, what's going to take place, okay, by the action of these hormones. All right, now pathologies regarding this, so disorders, so diabetes mellitus, okay, so type 1 diabetes would be an autoimmune type disorder, and this leads to destruction of the beta cells, right, releasing and synthesizing and releasing insulin. And know that type 2 is really what primarily when you hear patients that are dealing with diabetes, it's as a result of type 2 diabetes more than likely, okay? And so what's going on is that the insulin that is being produced, it's being produced maybe in too little amounts, and it's also what's being produced is really ineffective as far as managing blood glucose levels. So this is a major risk for obesity. Blood containing too much sugar damages capillaries, so it can lead to blindness. It can lead to issues with circulation. It can lead to patients end up having to have portions of their body actually amputated because of issues with complications as a result of diabetes, and issues with wound healing, and issues with poor circulation. Really quite bad actually. So diabetes, type 2 diabetes is really very difficult illness. Hypoglycemia. So this is what we talked about as far as and a pathological issue, pathological disorder of hypoglycemia. So much sugar is removed from the blood that the brain cells may have too little fuel to function properly, and so this could make a patient lightheaded and kind of disoriented and such. So how do we do this as far as then do something to quickly increase blood glucose levels, like a candy or something, or orange juice, in order to bring up the blood glucose levels quickly? The gonads would be your ovaries and the testes, and for the female and male in particular, respectively, producing sex hormones. So think of estrogen, progesterone, think of testosterone. These are all, so estrogen would be the feminizing hormone, testosterone would be the masculinizing hormone, okay? very important to keep that in mind. So knowing that, this is what leads to the actual production and maturity of the sex organs present within the male and the female and the male respectively again. So very important as far as their functions. And progesterone, really a very important hormone in order to maintain a pregnancy, okay? Very, very important. We'll talk about that when we discuss the reproductive system. You'll see here as far as the pineal gland producing, synthesizing melatonin. Melatonin, some people will actually take this as a supplement at night before bed in order to help them to calm down a bit. What happens is that you'll see here it says it influences the sleep-wake cycles, and it's produced by your body naturally when it starts getting dark outside in order to calm you down and get you ready for bed. Yep, melatonin, pineal gland. And here you're just seeing, and I won't really talk too much about this, but I want to show you that I mentioned to you earlier that luteinizing hormone, it's the trigger for ovulation, the release of the egg, the mature egg. And so this luteinizing hormone spikes, and then that's the mid-cycle of the ovarian cycle, and that'll lead to then the release of the egg. And this is when then the latter part of the cycle, and during the, here's the uterine cycle also, where we have the thickening of the uterine wall for the possibility of a fertilized egg implanting into there, right? Very important. Progesterone, this is the level, this is the hormone that's actually pro-pregnancy. It's going to increase and maintain this thick uterine lining just in case that there is a fertilization taking place of the egg in order then to have it implant. But if there is no fertilization of an egg, then you're going to have a drop in these hormone levels, which will in turn lead to the first day of your cycle. This would be when your period begins and you start to bleed, okay? Menses would be taking place for 3 to 5 days. And here we have as far as, so these gonads, the testes, the ovaries, these are the specific parts of the anatomy that will produce the gametes, the eggs. So the egg and the sperm, these are the gametes. These are the sex cells. Okay. You'll see here also as far as additional hormone sources. So, you know, within the digestive tract, within the skeletal system, the thymus gland releasing these thymosins, right? These are specific hormones produced by the thymus gland that will be involved in helping to increase your immune response, helping infection-fighting T cells mature. These are the thymosins, and so it's really increasing the effectiveness of your immune system to do what it needs to do. Like I said, the heart, the GI tract, these are all areas that are actually working and actively involved in producing hormones, but really the endocrine system, when we think of it, and as far as the glands, that's when we're talking about and showing you as far as the pituitary gland, the thymus gland, the adrenal glands, the pancreas and such. These are all actively involved in producing specific hormones in the endocrine system. You'll see here that as far as the endocrine system produces hormones, travels in the bloodstream to signal target cells, work together with the nervous system to adjust body functions to maintain homeostasis, this stable environment within the body, no matter what goes on outside of the body. It can be dry, it can be wet, it can be hot, it could be cold. Outside of the body, your body still can maintain its proper blood pressure, it can maintain its proper temperature, heart rate, respiratory rate, chemical levels. This is homeostasis. And the endocrine system, it works in conjunction with the nervous system. Again, endocrine system, slower acting, longer lasting. The nervous system, faster acting, shorter duration of effect. Okay. Let's see here. Yeah, so the response to hormones takes longer than response to the nerve impulses, right? Because again, I mentioned to you the part of, you know, I'm touching something hot, right away my hand will be removed from that hot stove, that hot plate, be hot water, the fire, right? It'll be quickly removed. It's a very quick action. The endocrine system, slower acting. Okay, so let's stop recording.